Rachel said, yes, my name is Steve Counsel. I'm with Batzner Pest Management. I am a lead service professional. Been here for just about 5 years. I've worked in the service areas, the training areas, and of course the bed bug areas, which we'll be discussing today. So as we were saying, welcome. A little bit about Batzner. Batzner Services is comprised of essentially 3 different units. It's a Batzner Pest Management, Batzner Bed Bug Services, and of course Batzner Skilled Contractors. We are a family-owned and operated local business serving Wisconsin, and we'll be talking to you today about bed bug trends, infestations versus introductions, who is at risk, bed bug action plans, transference, biology identification and health risks, and of course infection monitoring and treatment options. So I like to start off with this little icebreaker, and that is of course what comes to mind when you think of bed bugs. That could be different for quite a few people. But what is very interesting about this is this wonder word diagram that was created by the National Pest Management Association. You can see there is quite an array of different words. The larger words on the screen right there are those that came up most frequently when people were asked that question. The smaller ones, of course, are those that didn't come up as often. What's important to note that when you are dealing with pests like ants or mice, cockroaches, sanitation is pest management. They are in there for a sanitation or structural reason. However, when you're dealing with bed bugs, communication and education is pest management. Essentially what we are doing here today, the communicating and the education, it is your form of making yourself aware and pest management proving your places and yourself. So we'll start things off right now with trends. Of course, talking about the human issues that bed bugs bring, predictions, and public relations. First things first, bed bugs are a human issue. There's no ifs, ands, or ors about it. Matter of fact, they are what are referred to as a human nesting parasite. By this, of course, the key term in that is nesting. Which means that they aren't so much living on the body itself. It's more along the lines that they live where we nest, or where we tend to frequent in our homes. Say, the bed that you like to sleep in at night, or that favorite couch that sometimes gets kicked off onto. Because of this fact, they are just as unpredictable as people. So when it comes to bed bugs, education is the first step in understanding. And you will hear me reference that phrase very frequently, that education is the best medicine for bed bugs. Now, when it comes to bed bugs, of course, there's public reaction, right? You tend to really help yourself out when you educate yourself. And education really is the key to prevention. And there's no doubt in anybody's minds that's listening right now that bed bugs have been a very hot topic in the news for several years. Anytime you turn on TV or listen to the radio, open a newspaper, or type in a Google search, most likely if you're looking for it, it's very easy to find bed bug related issues. And because of this high intensity of media coverage, people become desensitized over time, which in turn can increase your risk. Now, the best way to lower your risk of public reaction could possibly just come from educating yourself on consumer product protection. That can come down to bedding casements, which we will touch in just a little bit. Also, the more you know, the better off you lessen your anxiety, your stress, and of course the financial burden of not being proactive. Now, further along in public reaction, there's no doubt that bed bugs certainly cost quite a bit to take care of, but they also come with what's called a stigma barrier. I'm okay with telling you that I may have had ants in my kitchen at one point in time, or that I've seen a stinging insect nest outside of my door. But you'd be remiss to hear people openly discussing the fact that they have bed bugs in their home. There is a social stigma involved with that. Truth of the matter is, anyone can be affected. It comes down to that they don't care about socioeconomical statuses, they don't care about what you ate last night, all they care about is that really delicious looking blood in our bodies. Good news, though, is that they do not typically spread disease. There have been no studies shown that they are able to transmit diseases. Well, that's wonderful news. Of course, it's easier for me to say this than it is to do this, right? There really is no need to panic because there's quite a bit of educational information out there for you to safeguard yourself. Last but not least, they can quickly and effectively be managed with the right tools. And today we'll discuss some of those tools so you are aware of them as well. Once again, I can't stress this further enough, early detection is key. So all right, let's talk a little bit about statistics and trends. First of all, bedbug infestations tend to be reported at a higher basis during the summer. Summer is usually the traveling season. When people travel, these guys move around just as much as we do. Milwaukee ranks 21st in the list of top 50 cities. That's actually good news. We were much, 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 much lower on that, or more towards the 1, 2, 3s in there. So hitting 21 was actually a good sign for us. Chicago, unfortunately, still hits that #1 spot, but quite a few things are being done to help take care of that. Of course, according to PCT magazine, as of March 2014, really comes down to different attitudes and collaboration levels affect the speed of elimination. And what that really comes down to is cooperation between all parties associated with the control measures. So what does a successful bed bug management program look like? Well, of course you have to have monitoring. And monitoring comes with regularly scheduled canine sweeps. This falls, of course, with preventative measures as well. The more proactive you are in taking care of issues, the better and easier it will be for you to take care of them if an issue does come about. Interceptors and visual inspections can help you with the monitoring. And we'll talk a little bit more about interceptors as we venture further into this program. But a visual inspection is just that. Literally using your eyes and the knowledge that pest management professionals can cater to you will help you create a better visual inspection experience. Careful treatment and follow-up monitoring is also a nice preventative measure. Of course, treatments will come once an actual activity is found, but it's a nice way to kind of knock it out right before it begins to get out of control. Due diligence and effective protocol. Of course, as I've been saying over and over again, education is the key to prevention, and education is putting in your due diligence. And the effective protocol is really going to come down to having a plan for you and your organization. Last but not least, lack of cooperation is often the main obstacle in carrying out bed bug control, which I think can pretty much go without saying. If you don't have cooperation from all the parties associated, you're going to have a more difficult time maintaining control. However, I don't have all doom and gloom to tell you, because quite frankly, there is a lot of really wonderful information out there. I do highly recommend not just simply going to a Google search, but actually looking up universities or some of these fine places, such as the National Pest Management Association, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, and the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. They have really wonderful information that's all accessible via their websites. And of course, Batzner.com is always going to have up-to-date information as well for you. So now that we've discussed the trends, let's take a look at infestation versus introduction. We have to know what it looks like before we can take care of it, right? So we'll talk about infestations first and foremost. An infestation is when you are dealing with a breeding population. Essentially, all life cycles are present. They're commonly found in multi-unit housing. Not that it's directly towards it, but they can be more common in lower-income homes. And the unfortunate problem that leads with those two right there is that it often leads to secondary or tertiary infestations in people's lives. Now, what that last point means is that let's just say I go visit my grandmother, and she has bed bugs. She does not tell me this information, of course, so I happen to sit on her couch or lay on a bed, whatever happens to have bed bug activity. I get bed bugs on me or any of the products or bags that I may have brought in, and I take those home. Of course, now I have maybe brought in an infestation of bed bugs. What I just referenced really comes down to what is an introduction. You are dealing with not yet a breeding population. You've introduced one or two little guys that may have snuck their way into a bag, and of course, if it's not checked, can lead to an infestation. Now, just due to the nature of introductions, they're most common in medical facilities. You're getting people in and out that are bringing materials themselves, clothes, into the facility on a constant basis. Of course, what they're bringing from home, you have no control over. They're usually brought in from a single source. It could be an individual patient, visitor, staff, or quite frankly, deliveries. Of course, these can lead to reintroductions. Even if an infestation has been taken care of, all signs are clear. That's not to say a week later something could happen and a reintroduction is put through. And of course, if the right steps are taken, infestations can be reduced and knocked out when the proper steps are done. Oops, I apologize, went too far. So of course, who is at risk? We wouldn't be having this conversation if nobody was at high risk, right? Hospitals and clinics, of course, will have to deal with bed bug issues quite frequently. They're at the highest risk because they can't exactly pull or push people away. They're really just trying to fight an uphill battle, but with the right plans, they can get taken care of. Social services facilities. Once again, you get that revolving door, people coming in and out, that over time, maybe somebody might bring them in. Temporary housing and shelters. This, of course, once again falls along with that revolving door, but along with temporary housing and shelters, they also receive quite a bit of donations. And if those donations aren't inspected thoroughly, that can sometimes lead to spreading of infestations. Hotels, my goodness. If hotels weren't on here, I think you'd think I was lying. Hotels are always in the news because of bed bug issues, so they're definitely at the high risk category. Multi-unit housing falls into the same concept of the temporary housing and shelters, except with multi-unit housing, you have the issue of spread. Infestations actually spreading, especially with long-term tenants that may not know they have an issue. Correctional facilities, and last but not least, used furniture and thrift shops. Donations can and sometimes will have issues or bed bugs on them, and if they're not inspected entirely, that can lead to spread as well. Oh, pardon me. Further along on who is at high risk, quite frankly, any facility without an education plan, which thank you very much for taking part of this today, a response plan, which we'll dive into in just a little bit, a communication plan, and of course a media response plan. Now you might be thinking, Steve, I have no idea what those last three are. Tell me more about them. And I can't. These are what are referred to as a bed bug action plan. It's pest management and a media response. So what encompasses a bed bug action plan? Well, of course, you have to lay out the groundwork. And what that means is you want to identify key people to help you develop, implement, and communicate your action plan. You want to figure out what are your biggest risks to not only your company, but the people that are working there. How do bed bugs enter the facility that you are currently working at? Or if you're making house visits, how are they entering that house? Where are they in that particular place? How will they spread? Then, of course, education. Can't stress that enough. There also has to be a purpose. Of course, everything has to have a purpose, right? And the purpose comes down to communication, control, contain, preventative actions, and record keeping. Now, communication doesn't just mean inter-employee, my apologies. It comes down to everybody that's associated and involved with the action plan, and that could be involved just maybe from a secondary or tertiary infestation point. Now, of course, you want to be able to answer the question of how do you plan on controlling or containing the issue once it arises. Following that, what are the preventative actions that you and your organization are going to take in order to make sure you don't have to come to the control and contain? And last but not least, record keeping. Documents, documents, documents. It's everyone's best friend to keep a paper trail. The next part of the action plan is immediate communication plan. You want to be able to react and respond appropriately to protect the reputation of your company. Let's put it this way. Within the last 10 years, can you think of any company that's name may have been tarnished from pest activity or issues? It doesn't have to be on a national scale. It could be simply you and a friend communicating with one another, and one says, oh, I happen to hear that X place happens to have this problem. That is tarnishing of that company's image. And you want to make sure, as an employee of the company you work for, that you are trying to do the best you can to protect that reputation. Reacting in an appropriate manner involves emergency contacts and an internal crisis team. Of course, who gets contacted in the case of an emergency or when an issue arises? Do you contact the patient or the residents if they're family members to let them know of a particular issue or concern? You also want to make sure that you stay ahead of the curve, and if it comes down to this being an immediate issue, you can always contact them and let them know that you are on top of things. And of course, if the general public needs to be involved, letting them know as well. What is transference? What transference is essentially is what I mentioned earlier with my grandmother. If I go to my grandmother's house and I get bed bugs and I take them home, that is an issue of transference. And of course, as I have been told, you are, as the organization stands, you do home visits. So what are ways that you can prevent yourself from obtaining bed bugs and transference when you're entering these homes that may have infestations? Well, first and foremost, it's always a great idea to contact the client prior to the home visit. Next of all, ask if any known insect infestation or pest control treatments have been done within the last 2 to 3 months. I will tell you right now, it's actually very, very surprising how open some people will really be about this information. If they say yes, inquire about bed bugs. And please, you have to also make sure you take into consideration, as I mentioned earlier, that bed bugs do carry a social stigma. So being compassionate will really help you along. As I mentioned, please be tactful about it. And of course, if bed bugs were a problem within the last 10 months, take precautions. Now, what kind of precautions are we talking about? First things first, bring a plastic tote. And this could always be stored in the trunk of the vehicle you are driving or in an otherwise secluded area of the vehicle. When you are finished inside of the house in question, changing your clothes and shoes and placing them inside that plastic tote will help not spread anything that may have gotten onto those articles of clothing. If it comes down to it, you certainly can use a Tyvek suit. Depends on how much attention you want to bring to yourself. I understand you're going in some sensitive houses, so therefore maybe that might not be the best approach. There's an example of a plastic tote right there. You want to make sure it has a nice seal around here, no cracks or gaps. If there are cracks or gaps, you'll want to replace it because it'll essentially refute the point of having it to begin with. And of course, you place the clothes right on in there. Personal protective equipment is always important. Kits should be closed up in a nice plastic bag, zipped if at all possible. Those should contain 1 pair of gloves. They say medium gloves on here, but quite frankly, anything that fits. Medium gloves won't fit on me. 1 pair of disposable shoe covers, a disposable gown. You can even use that Tyvek suit if it comes down to it. 2 plastic garbage bags, and 4-ounce hand sanitizer. Now you might be wondering what the plastic garbage bags are for. And what this really comes down to is that when you change out of the clothes that you'd wore into the potentially infested house, the clothes that you were wearing should go inside of the garbage bag. And from the garbage bags, you are allowed to carry that wherever and bring that to, say, a dryer and heat up your clothes and kill any of the bed bugs that might be inside of there. So at the home visit, you can always perform what's called a 30-second eye sweep. If at all possible, it's highly recommended make sure you keep coats, backpacks, purses, bags, anything that you are essentially carrying into the facility. Keep them off of beds, recliners, and sofas, large appliances and furniture, please. And if at all possible, avoid sitting or placing items on potentially infested surfaces. Now, you might be wondering, how do I know if they're infested? Well, we'll get into that in just a moment. Now, after the home visit, these are some things that you should try to make sure you take care of. First and foremost, check your shoes after leaving home visits. Bed bugs are incredible hitchhikers, and shoes, depending of course, can have lots of cracks and crevices for them to sneak into. Change your clothes immediately before or when entering your home. I personally recommend if you have a garage, fantastic spot. Launder the clothing in hot water and or dried on a high setting for at least 20 minutes. 20 minutes is a pretty good number. The idea is that you want to heat the clothes at a temperature above 121 degrees. Dry clean or steam clean clothing that cannot be washed or dried at high settings. Of course, we'll touch on this a little bit further, but bed bugs do not like very high heat, so that will certainly have a lethal effect on them. There's our little friend, the dryer. So what you're doing today is fantastic. You're educating yourself, but you also want to make sure that not only is it you that's informed, but your entire staff. Batzner Pest Management highly recommends mandatory bed bug training for new hires. Essentially, you should look at it just like bloodborne pathogen training. There's constant updates that are done to both, and both should be updated on an annual basis. So everyone's informed of the newest and latest trends. All right, next up we have bed bug biology, identification, and health risks. We're going to make sure that by the time you leave this webinar, you are confident in your identification skills. Oh, what lovely pictures we have here. Bed bugs come in all shapes and sizes, there's no doubt about it. What we have right here is a diagram of the entire bed bug life cycle. First off, starting from the left-hand side, we have the eggs. Very, very small little things that are actually glued to surfaces. If you take a nice bright flashlight and you're able to actually spot eggs, if you take something to try to scrape them off and it's difficult to do so, you may be dealing with eggs. What they look very close and similar to are like salt or sugar crystals, really. The bright light will actually reflect pretty positively on there. If it is sugar or some other different debris, it should slough off pretty easily. Right next to that on the right, we have what's referred to as the first instar. Now, bed bugs, they have something that's called incomplete metamorphosis. They start out as an egg, and they go through several stages of their nymph cycle, and then they turn into the adults. Kind of think of it as human beings. We start off as an egg, and we are a baby, we have our adolescence, our teenage punk years, and then we turn into unfed adults. So that little guy right there, the first instar, is really small, is kind of a clear, almost cream color, and he can only turn into the second instar form once he's had a blood meal. Then as we venture further and further and further along, you can see they get bigger and bigger and bigger. On that fourth instar, you can see that dark dot on the abdomen towards the back of that bed bug. What that is dried blood that has not yet been digested further in the bed bug, essentially staining the inside of that bug. And then the last two pictures on the right we have the unfed and fed adult. The unfed adult is what's most commonly noticed. The fed adult is rather, it gets larger, of course, it expands with the amount of blood meal that it's eaten. Now, I do want to make sure I point out that if you see the writing towards the bottom here, the very last line says, adult bed bugs can live 10 or more months without a blood meal. In a perfect world, that could certainly be possible. And what that information is gathered from our laboratory tests. However, it has come to be known that in the wild, out in the real world, that time frame more reflects close to 90 days, so roughly about 3 months, which is still rather impressive that they can go that long without eating. But we want to make sure that you know exactly what a bed bug looks like. However, there are different critters out there that can sometimes trip you up. And we're going to go over each one of those to make sure that you're aware of them. First and foremost is what's referred to as a socid, or a book louse. A real small little guy. You can see those goofy looking eyes kind of tucked down the side of their head. What should really point out that that guy is not a bed bug are those very long antennae. Next up, we have the flea. Everybody knows what a flea is, right? Hopefully you haven't had to deal with them. They have those really powerful back legs that allows them to jump, which they're notorious for. They also feed on blood, so sometimes bites can be mistaken for bed bug bites. However, a fact about bed bugs is that they cannot jump. They can only crawl around. So if you see anything jumping around, chances are it's fleas. Last but not least about the flea, they are vertically stationed, or their body is vertically set up to allow them to navigate through hairs much easier. Or if you look at that bed bug picture at the bottom middle, he's really flat, isn't he? He'd have a much harder time navigating through some hair. Next up is the carpet beetle. And you might be wondering, well, that carpet beetle looks nothing like a bed bug. But it's not so much that the adult carpet beetle is what's being confused. It's the larvae of the carpet beetle that you don't actually see. Small worm-like little bug has a lot of very, very sharp bristles that some people will have an allergic reaction to. And it's that allergic reaction that people sometimes associate with potentially bed bug activity. Next up, we have roach nymphs. In this particular picture, we are looking at a German cockroach nymph. They do look rather similar. However, once again, I want to direct your attention to those really long antennae at the top of that guy's head. Those are the first telltale that you are not dealing with a bed bug. Next up, to the bottom left, we have body lice. Now, as I had mentioned earlier, bed bugs are a human nesting parasite, meaning that they will essentially thrive and live in the areas that we quote-unquote nest. Beds, sofas, you name it. However, body lice have to live on the body, and they, of course, feed on blood as well. Last but not least, we have our little friend, the tick, in the bottom right corner. They can be confused with bed bugs because they have that same sort of shape, that oval style shape, but they're also roughly the same size, depending if you are seeing a female. But the number one telltale feature about a tick between that and a bed bug are the amount of legs. Ticks have 8 legs. And if you look at the bed bug, that picture right there does a very nice job of showcasing what the bed bug legs look like. I always like to refer to it as the strongman pose. The bed bug legs to the top closest to the head are kind of shaped up like a U, like he just scored a touchdown in a football game. The next legs are facing more towards the middle, while the bottom legs are angled at a downward shape. So it looks like a strong man going through his poses. And oh, I did forget to mention, I do apologize. If at all possible, please get a sample and bring it to your nearest pest management company and they can help you identify. So bed bug bites, we've talked a little bit about them. What's the deal with those? Well, not everyone reacts the same. Quite frankly, most people have what's referred to as a delayed reaction. And the delayed reaction can take anywhere between 2 days to 4 weeks to actually have any sort of symptom. Some will have no reaction whatsoever. And in rare cases, an instant reaction can take place. In even rarer circumstances, anaphylactic shock, much like if you're allergic to stinging insects, can occur. Skin irritations are often misidentified as bites. If you know somebody that thinks they may have bedbug bites, it's best to get a medical professional to take a look at it. When I mean skin irritations, those can come from very, very easy things that change within your lifestyle. Changing a particular brand of soap or laundry detergent can often lead to skin irritations. Now, I've mentioned earlier, bed bugs are not actually vectors for disease. They have not been proven to do that at all, which, of course, is wonderful news for us. Pathogens have been, however, detected in and on these insects. Some of these include hepatitis B, Chagas' disease, hepatitis C, and HIV. Now, it sounds like maybe I'm contradicting myself, but I'm not. The bed bugs themselves will certainly bite and absorb any of these diseases that are within the bloodstream of that particular host, but they have not been shown to actually transmit the disease if they move on to a different host for feeding, which, as I've mentioned, is really good news. Bed bugs are absolutely, however, a health hazard. They can affect public health. They cause secondary infections after people scratch their bed bug bites. Think of it in the terms of a mosquito bite. Now, between my wife and I, she'll get a really big welt if she gets bitten by a mosquito. I, on the other hand, may have a bump, but rarely do I really have anything wild that I need to scratch at. She can scratch at that bite. Over time, yes, if it's not taken care of, it can open and blister up. And of course, those that have been affected by bed bugs have been shown in circumstances to have higher stress, sometimes loss of work, loss of productivity, and financial burden. Essentially, their mind is elsewhere. There have been studies shown that bed bugs can actually create symptoms very similar to post-traumatic stress syndrome. Now, of course, impact on mental health of people living in infested homes can certainly really focus on these stress levels, the loss of work, the productivity, and the financial burden as well. Now, we discussed earlier the 30-second eye sweep, and now I'm here to tell you exactly what that is. The 30-second eye sweep is essentially what you are, the telltale signs that you might be inside of a house that has dealt with bed bugs. The first and foremost are insecticides that are just out in the open. This is not a staged picture whatsoever in the top left. This was taken on site at a particular client's house. Anytime you see quite a bit of bottles of insecticide, means they're trying to self-treat and take care of the problem on their own, which means they've been dealing with them for a while. I always love this in the top middle picture here, dryer sheets. If you do a quick Google search and type in cheap, easy, or green ways to eliminate bed bugs, somewhere in there, very close to the top, you will have somebody mention dryer sheets. I must tell you from firsthand experience, the one thing I love about dryer sheets all over the place in a bed bug infested home is it smells wonderful, but it does nothing for the bed bugs. What you see in the top right corner here is what's referred to as diatomaceous earth dust. And diatomaceous earth actually has been an insecticide that's been used for hundreds of years. However, bed bugs have shown great resistance to DE dust. And of course, people that are trying to self-treat for bed bugs don't know how to applicate it in an effective and professional manner. So you'll often get these kind of messy looking baseboards like what we're seeing in this picture. Other things that you might notice, well, quite frankly, you could see actual nymphs, eggs, or the bed bugs themselves just running around. You see that, you are definitely in the house of an infested place. Blood staining. Now, this is different than what you see next to that bed bug fecal staining. Blood stains literally means that, as if, as gross as it sounds, someone just popped a pimple and there's that blood that kind of comes out a little bit there. actual blood staining on furniture, pillows, are telltale signs. Now, of course, bedbug fecal matter looks much different than the blood staining picture, right? It's dark. It almost looks like you take a Sharpie or a felt tip pen and you dot on fabric. And when you dot something like that on fabric, it bleeds in, just like bedbug fecal matter. Now, the 5-minute inspection, of course, is a little bit more in-depth than just that 30-second eye sweep. What we're focusing on here is the primary bedbug harborage point, which accounts for roughly about 70% of the population of the bedbugs. Now, inside this box is where we're looking at initially. This is roughly between that 3 to maybe 4 foot range. In this case, we're focusing on the bed, the headboard, that picture frame very close by, those lights, the telephone, that alarm clock, the table bedside right there, those areas very close proximity. Next up, we have the 5-foot range, and that accounts for the secondary bedbug harborages. Now, of course, a much broader area, you're getting into the second bed, the other picture that's on the wall off to the side, maybe even the television set there, and the dresser right there also. And yes, these 93% certainly cause problems, right? However, it's that other bedbug harborages that create the 7%, those are the nasty ones. When I mentioned earlier about introductions, that's because of these other bedbugs, which are usually comprised of pregnant females. So the 5-minute inspection encompasses, of course, an inspection within 3 to 5 feet of the sleeping area or the area that the client or person tends to spend a majority of their time. The headboard or the head of the bed area tends to be what's most frequently infested, strictly because bedbugs are attracted to 2 different things, heat and CO2. Heat, of course, if you were to take a nice infrared picture, like a heat-sensitive picture of a human being, the head is one of the hotter parts of the body. On top of that, whenever we exhale, we breathe out, we produce CO2. The baseboards or any of the molding near the sleeping area, picture frames near sleeping areas. I must tell you from experience, picture frames are a great spot for these guys to hide. Outlet covers near sleeping areas, the mattress in the box spring itself, and nightstands, anything within the proximity of that 3 to 5 foot sleeping area. Here's a couple of examples for you. When I had mentioned that pictures are a great spot for these guys to hide, the top left picture is proof of that. All those small black dots, that is actual bedbug fecal staining, but the other larger pieces you see there, those are actually bedbugs running around. And if you have really good eyes, you can see the smaller ones, but also the kind of clearer looking bedbugs there, those are cast skins. On the top right here, we have bedbugs that are on the actual box spring. They love those corner pieces right there, especially because of all the folds and gaps. But what's also interesting to note about this particular picture, it's difficult to see it, and I do apologize about that, is the outlet towards the back of the picture there. You can see towards the bottom, the small dots there, bedbugs are actually crawling behind that outlet and harboring themselves. On the bottom left, we have along the floorboard, you can see the activity tends to increase along that heat bend. As I mentioned, they are attracted to heat. Just, of course, not as hot as it needs to be to kill them, of course. Last but not least, we have the mattress, the seams of those mattresses, that lip. That is a very good picture to indicate what bedbug fecal staining looks like. As I mentioned earlier, it looks like a felt tip or like a Sharpie style pen or marker slowly dotted onto a mattress, which allows the ink to absorb into it. Well, as I said, I don't want to be just doom and gloom. I want to let you know that there are treatment options. Actually, there's 3. And it comes down to when they should be used and why they should be used. So first of all, we're going to go over traditional chemical applications, which are great to be done in heavily infested areas, especially when there's multiple units that need to be treated. It's also great to use the traditional chemical treatment when areas are more likely to be reinfested because you're not dealing with cooperative tenants. Wouldn't it be wonderful if everybody cooperated? But unfortunately, it's not always the case. Next up, we have thermal remediation, or heat treatments, as you've probably heard of them before. And what heat treatments are really great for are heavy infestations, but of a few units that are unlikely to be reinfested because of cooperative tenants. You have to have cooperation when heat treatments are about to be performed, because the last thing that anybody would like is damage done to their property because of high temperatures inside of that area, or the room, or their house, or apartment. And last but not least are steam treatments. These are kind of the quick draw McGraw sort of treatments. Mild infestation or introductions are what these are good for. They provide a nice quick turnaround. They're often used for healthcare facilities. So in the point of steam treatment, if it's just, say, a single chair that maybe has a couple of bed bugs on it, a steam treatment can be recommended, performed on the spot, and the issue is resolved right then and there. Really wonderful, and it can be done so quickly. Of course, do-it-yourself bed bug treatments, we have to talk about those. What I recommend to you is that they are not advised at all. You see the big danger button in the middle or the corner there? I absolutely mean that, because it can be dangerous to people and property. By all means, do yourself a favor, and you can Google or just look up information on people that try to self-treat and either burn their house down or started their mattresses on fire. Any of these just horrible stories because they were just strictly trying to treat with what they didn't know. Now, bed bugs are resistant to most over-the-counter products. This is very, very important to know, and it's important for you to make sure you inform others on this. So if you happen to see, as we've mentioned earlier, the can of aerosol that would be sitting on one side of a bed, they may actually be doing more damage than good. Because when self-treatments are performed, especially with resistant materials or materials they are resistant to, you can sometimes make the bed bugs much harder to eliminate. You are essentially giving them all the tools that they need to withstand whatever you can bring to them. And in the case of, say, bug bombs or high-intensity aerosols, you can sometimes drive bed bugs into other areas in rooms, essentially spreading the problem and not eliminating it. So as a recap, we talked about bed bug trends, infestation versus introduction, who is at risk and high risk, bed bug action plan. Hopefully you get yours set up very soon. Transference, biology, identification, and health risks associated with bed bugs. And last but not least, we discussed it, inspection, monitoring, and treatment options. So, of course, I want to leave you with this. What is your plan? Do not wait for an infestation at all. It's best to stay ahead of the curve than behind it, right? So developing a bed bug action plan will only lead to your success. And if you have questions on bed bug action plans, by all means, you can certainly use Batzner.com as a resource. This particular link right here will lead you to any and everything that we have that can help you out. So once again, I want to say thank you very much to Rachel and the Salvation Army for allowing me to talk to you today. If you do have any questions, you can feel free to discuss them right after this via the message board or the information provided right here for you, stevec@batzner.com, or that telephone number. Those are ways you can reach me directly. Once again, thank you very, very much.
All right. Thank you, Steve. That was really great information. We do have a few questions that have come through that maybe we could just run through.
Of course.
Treatment's the big topic. The first question is, when heat treatment is used, how long do you maintain the temperature once it's reached in the unit? Also, do you recommend disposing of any cloth furniture in infected units?
Wonderful question. Both are really great, and I'm glad they were asked. As far as the amount of time for heat treatment, they take roughly between 8 to 10 hours. They are rather lengthy, but the reason for that is that the idea is to bring the temperature of the rooms above 121 degrees. It's become sort of common trend to focus on the 130 degree mark just to allow for a little bit of leniency. And this allows for any bed bugs that come into contact with that extreme heat. It is very lethal very quickly. Now, as for the second question, it is not recommended that infested cloth furniture to be removed and disposed of right away. If treatments can be done to them, the better. The reason for this, of course, is that large furniture, say a couch in this circumstance, are rather cumbersome and they're difficult to maneuver and move, correct? So if that is being moved from one room to the next, even if it's within the same house, or perhaps in a multi-unit house or apartment complex, you have the potential of actually spreading that bed bug issue. So the best thing to do is to actually get the treatment done directly to the furniture itself.
Perfect, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Another question regarding treatment is which chemicals work? Because this person who asked this question, they've had situations with bed bugs twice in their homeless centers, and they were advised to do the heat, but because of the cost, which chemicals could work, or what's the most cost-effective solution, I guess, is the question.
Well, that is a good question, and I am very sorry to hear that. It is one of those things that I've mentioned that, unfortunately, it's a higher-risk facility. Heat would be a good idea, and I do understand that, yes, it comes with a certain cost, absolutely. However, there's really not much in the realm of products that I would recommend. As I mentioned earlier, any over-the-counter products or those that will actually be able to be purchased socially or over-the-counter are not going to really pose that much of a difference. They can actually lead to worse issues. They'll drive bed bugs into deeper, darker areas of the building or the house, which makes them much harder to treat for service professionals.
Okay. Next question is, can you still have bed bugs and not be able to see them on the bed?
Well, it's certainly a possibility. I mean, they're fantastic little hiders. However, as I did mention earlier, and bed bugs, of course, get the name bed bugs because they're associated with the bed, right? However, it's really any place that a person spends a majority of their time. It's very, very common, actually, for clients to come up to us. Actually, this just happened to me yesterday. And he had mentioned, well, I don't have bed bugs on my bed. And I had asked the question of where do you spend the majority of your time? And he said, on his couch. And within maybe a minute or two, I was able to find roughly between 40 to 50 bed bugs on a sofa that he spent a majority of his time on, whereas his bed was completely clean. So it really just comes down to getting that information from the client or the person that you are speaking to that may have the bed bug issue.
All right. Let me go through and make sure I don't miss anybody's question.
Oh, of course, absolutely. I love answering questions.
Can you confirm one more time how long you leave the temp once they're doing the heat treatment, how many hours that is?
Not a problem. We focus on between 8 and 10 hours.
8 and 10 hours, okay.
Yes.
And then can bed bugs hide in cracks after a room has been treated and come out again?
Oh, certainly. Now, I imagine when you say treated, you're referencing a chemical treatment. Yes, that's actually very possible for them to hide in these little cracks and gaps. That is one of the biggest reasons why when rooms are being treated or inspected, that they're done in clusters. And when I say cluster, what I mean is that the affected room is treated, and then all other rooms or apartments, whatever is associated or close to that. A really nice little way to think of this is above, below, to the left, to the right, behind the wall, and across the hall.
All right. Next question is there any insurance that can be purchased to help with the cost of treatments?
Boy, that's a really great question. Not that I'm aware of. I know that it's been tossed around a little bit in political musings of potentially trying to make bed bugs a little bit easier to try to treat financially. But nothing that I have read or come across has actually been definitive about that. Yeah, I do apologize. Yeah, it really, when it comes to bed bugs, yeah, there's no joking that they are certainly a pest that comes with a hefty price tag. But really, that price tag comes from not being proactive. If you are proactive, you can sometimes hit these infestations much earlier, actually making it easier on you and much cheaper usually down the road too.
Okay. Here in the Wisconsin Upper Michigan Division, they've purchased the heat treatment equipment, but some of the other folks from the other areas are inquiring kind of what the cost is for a treatment. If you could give like I know it probably varies based on geographics and things, but some sort of a range of what treatment costs are.
Yeah, well, you kind of nailed it when you said it really just depends. It's not so much the geographic, it's the square footage, what areas are being heat treated. It really kind of bounces all over the board. So me throwing out a couple of numbers, unfortunately, as much as I'd love to, would really not be very helpful because it would be a really large range.
Okay, I understand.
Yeah, I apologize.
So do you recommend when you're going with a company, would you recommend, is heat the only way to go, or is chemical an option for places using treatment?
Oh, not at all. Quite frankly, all three treatments are extremely successful. And it's actually become more and more commonplace that companies, I apologize, will actually intermingle the treatments, meaning they'll perform heat treatments and a chemical application at the same visit. Now, what's good to know and what's important to realize is that if you plan on having a canine inspection, essentially a canine dog trained to smell and sniff out live bed bugs, you want to make sure that a treatment through chemicals has not been done within the last 30 days. The reason for that, of course, is that their noses are extremely sensitive, and inhaling or sniffing any of that product may have an adverse effect on that particular animal. So to really kind of bone dry answer the question, any of those applications are certainly effective. It just comes down to cooperation from the tenants or the property owners, the clients. And if you are receiving it, then maybe heat treatment will work. Or if you're not receiving that much cooperation or you want a little bit reduced price, then you could always try to go with chemical, the traditional treatments.
All right. Next question is, do you recommend bed bug covers? I'm assuming for mattresses they're referring to.
Oh, certainly. Oh, what's really great about bed bug covers, it's a couple things. Of course, if you have a infested mattress and you don't plan on throwing that mattress away, because we all know mattresses and beds aren't very cheap, right? So if you would like to just simply purchase one of those nice encasements, you certainly can. And what's great is that any of the bed bugs that are inside of that mattress will not be able to get out. Essentially, over the period of about 4 months, you can expect them to be dead. Now, I wouldn't recommend that by any means as a treatment measure. It's just food for thought. But on top of that, the white mattress and box spring encasement, if you've seen them before, they're pure white, just like the background of this screen right here. So if you do happen to get any bed bugs within that area and they're crawling on it, they stick out like a sore thumb. It's really easy to identify it right away, and the encasements actually eliminate all the creases and folds that bed bugs tend to focus and harbor themselves into.
All right. Next question is, what type of furniture do you recommend for offices or kind of residential areas? We have a lot of shelter and residential programs that are more bed bug resistant or would help prevent some of those infestations.
Oh, that's an interesting question. Really, what I focus on is less is more. they're not going to be as attracted to things that have a lot of metal to them because, of course, metal conducts heat and cold very effectively. So anything that's that doesn't, maybe not getting too gaudy, I guess would be the kind of layman's term I'm thinking of. But hard plastic is okay. Metal is fine too. Yeah, I guess that's pretty much what I have referenced. Yeah, that'd be good.
All right. Next question is just some clarification on transferring of bed bugs. A lot of our programs transport kids and families to camps or different types of youth events. Can they be transferred from sleeping bags, clothes, etc., if they were to be bringing those with them?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it really absolutely can be. If you are doing a lot of transporting like that, might not be a bad practice to invest in some of those large plastic bins that I mentioned earlier for your own use. But if you are, say, bussing around 4 kids or something like that, essentially giving each one, if the room allots for it, of course, their own tote, that can help the spread from all the other areas. Then on top of that, what's really nice too is that if you are aware of which totes belong to which person, and you take out the materials and you see a bed bug or two that may have fallen out of the backpack or sleeping bag, you know right then and there who has them, and you can of course try to work with them and alert them as well. So it really is nice. It's a twofold process. It allows you to be preventative, but it also helps you not spread them too.
Okay. Next question is, what is the likelihood that a home with a hoarding situation could be successfully treated?
Boy, hoarding situations are extremely difficult. There's no two ways about it, and I don't want to sugarcoat it either. When it comes to hoarding situations, they have to be handled rather delicately because, of course, it is a mental health concern. That's really where chemical treatment would try to be effective. In a hoarding situation, heat treatments would be trying to run up an ice hill. You would just get absolutely nowhere because there's just too much, well, stuff for them to kind of harbor down and never actually come into contact with those high heats. On top of that, you have no idea what's actually in the messes, I guess we'll put it that way, the piles that the hoarder situation presents. So in that circumstance, yes, you would definitely have to refer to traditional chemical treatments, and it would probably be a long-term process. Usually when it comes to traditional chemical treatment, it's done over a period of 6 weeks. Each treatment 2 weeks from each other. However, in a hoarding situation, I could definitely foresee that going for quite a bit longer.
Okay. We have some more questions about the heat treatment that I'm going to kind of consolidate.
No problem.
So the question is, do you keep the first part of it is, do you keep the heat at the 120 to 130 degrees for the entire 8 hours, or is that the whole treatment time? And then is it safe to have items like electronics, laptops, and cell phones, things that clients might have in their belongings while the building is being treated for heat, with the heat treatment?
Oh, sure, absolutely. No, great questions. Well, the entire duration of the service takes between 8 and 10 hours. You're probably looking, depending upon the size of the area that's actually being heated up for the treatment, could be anywhere between 4 and 6 hours. Could even in some circumstances go all the way up to 8 hours. It really just depends upon the square footage of the areas that need to be heated up. And as I mentioned earlier, the 130 degrees is strictly just kind of an accepted number for pest management companies. For example, last year when we had those really extreme heat, I took part in many different heat treatments that the heat actually exceeded 145 degrees. So when I stepped out into the 100-degree day, it actually felt like it was really, really cold. So it's very dependent, of course. But could you repeat the second question? I do apologize.
When doing heat treatment, like in a residential program where
Oh, yes.
clients would have belongings, is it safe for them to leave laptops, phones, and other types of belongings in that area while it's being treated?
Yes, thank you for that. I appreciate that. Well, there's actually quite a long laundry list of things that we recommend are removed from the particular place that's going to be treated, and they should be removed by being placed in plastic bags and tied up. And then, of course, stored in an area that's not going to be treated with the heat. Examples of this would be like medications, candles, things that don't deal with the heat very well. Now, electronics, as long as they're covered and they don't have direct access to the heat, they tend to be able to survive actually pretty resiliently. However, if there's any concern that if somebody wants to just make sure that nothing happens to it or whatever, storing it in a plastic bag and removing it is certainly a viable option.
All right. I think we have the record for the most questions in a webinar ever, so be patient.
Hey, I love it. That's all right.
We still have a list to go. When the bed bugs have been isolated to a group of rooms or in like a particular area of a residence, what precautions can we take to prevent spreading while we're treating the targeted areas?
Oh, great question. Best thing to do is to be careful about what is coming in and out of that room. I'll kind of lead this with an example. In the case of if a bedroom itself has quite a bit of activity, evidence, we're seeing bed bugs, it's not recommended for the person. It sounds a little disgusting, but we actually encourage the client to continue sleeping on the bed. And you might be thinking, Steve, you are heartless, but I swear there's actually goodness to that. And what that comes down to is often, and of course I think I would have the same reaction, if I have bed bugs in the bed, I don't really feel like sleeping on it, so I'm going to go sleep on the couch. However, by me doing that, I'm just spreading the bed bugs to different rooms. Now, if you are fortunate enough that you can contain the bed bugs to the area, just making sure what comes in and out of that room, the infested room, is going to be very preventative and proactive for spread.
All right. Next question is, they've heard that bed bugs can hide in DVD players and computers and things like that. Is that true?
It's true. I mean, absolutely. As I said earlier, they're amazing and just incredible hitchhikers. However, they will focus on areas that are able to absorb pheromones much better. What pheromones are essentially the subconscious scent that each individual person or animal or bug in this circumstance permeates. And different beings, they give off different pheromones. When it comes to bed bugs, they will produce different pheromones, a congregate pheromone, for example. That's why you will have multiple bed bugs kind of overlapping in the same space. So they'll go after cloth material. They'll go after any sort of a surface that will absorb. The back of a picture, for example, is usually cardboard. Cardboard is a great absorbent. Now, is it to say that they won't go into a VCR, DVD player, laptop, anything like that? No, they certainly can. They will do that if it's close to the area that the person spends the majority of their time, though. If it's kind of case in point when I mentioned earlier with the individual that had the infested sofa but the clean bed, if that particular person was to have a laptop very close by, it's possible they could get into that, absolutely.
And then if they are hidden in those types of places, a follow-up to that is, do both the heat and chemical treatments work, or only one or the other for that type of situation?
Oh, no. They would both certainly have an effect. I mean, the heat treatment causes them to essentially scurry out and try to find a new area to hide from the heat. And the chemical treatment, what's great about chemical treatment, and maybe I didn't touch on this earlier, and I do apologize, is what's important about chemical treatments done by a professional company is that they have a high residual rate. And what that means is that the product that's placed out will last for a long period of time, but also have a lethal effect for the duration of quite a bit of time. Let's just go ahead and say 4 to 6 weeks, just as a talking point. So when those treatments are done to furniture, baseboards, any affected areas, bed bugs are going to have to move in order to eat once again. And the process of killing those bed bugs, they have to come into direct contact with the treated areas. So by doing full-on chemical treatments, you increase the chance that not only will you be able to eliminate bed bugs as they are currently, but any future introductions that may happen within the course and life of the treatments.
Okay, next question is, where did bed bugs originate?
Oh, wonderful question. I like that one. Pardon me, I had to grab a drink of water quick. Bed bugs originated as what are referred to as bat bugs. And bat bugs are very much still around. Bat bugs, as you would very well guess, feed on bats. Now, of course, through the evolution of humanity, we decided that it was not as much fun being outside in the elements, but we would take refuge in caves. And as part of that, bat bugs would fall from the ceiling, come in contact with this brand new host known as human, and think, boy, this guy's rather delicious, and I don't need to fly towards these guys. So over time, they evolved from bat bugs into bed bugs.
All right, next one is, we have been told that bed bugs can't hold on to a moving body, so they fall off and you don't take them home. Is this true?
That is not true, unfortunately. It's not so much that they can't hold on or anything like that. It's that they are very comfortable sneaking and crawling into very, very dark cracks and crevices of, say, a purse, or if you have a rolled-up shirt, or the crevice of a shoe. However, it is important to note that bed bugs don't necessarily live on the body. Realistically, bed bugs will be on the human body for anywhere between 5 and 10 minutes for feeding, and that's it. So there's been rare circumstances, and I mean extremely rare circumstances, where bed bugs have actually lived on the human body. A really great example was a gentleman that had very large dreadlocks. The bed bugs were actually living inside that. But what that really comes down to is that the dreadlocks were acting as a fabric, a cushion, an area that's very resemblant to a bed or the seams of a sofa. So that is an extremely rare circumstance. But yes, unfortunately, they can grab on pretty tight and jump along for the ride.
All right, next question is, how likely can you get a bed bug infection by using a public shower?
I'm sorry, was it infection or infestation? Or
Infection.
Well, you won't actually receive any sort of an infection from bed bugs. And the good news is that they don't transmit diseases. I mean, of course, they can bite, but you wouldn't receive anything, especially in an area like a shower, which you really inadvertently led me to a nice little interesting tidbit of information for all of you. And that is for any of you that are travelers. Of course, we're kind of coming towards the end of that season. But for the future, if you want to check in, when you check into your hotel and you want to make sure that maybe safeguard in case they maybe have bed bugs, one of the best places for you to put your suitcase is in the bathtub. And the reason for that is they have a very difficult time climbing up very, very smooth surfaces. And bathtubs are usually created with that in mind. The smooth surface is not bed bugs, of course. So it's a neat little tidbit fact for you guys to take. So when you go and venture off somewhere, that's a nice little spot. So showers, say like at a gym or something like that, shouldn't have to worry too much about bed bugs coming and hanging out by you in there.
All right. Next one is, back to where you talked about if there was an infestation, to continue to use that bed instead of spreading it to another couch or something.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're continuing to use that infected bed, does it help to launder the bed sheets daily, or anything you can do to help prevent like further whatever?
Oh, no, good. Yeah, I get what you mean. Absolutely. Laundering is one of the greenest ways that you can honestly help a pest management professional take care of those issues for you. And you don't have to necessarily soap wash these things all the time. Just the high heat of a dryer for between 20 and 30 minutes is enough to kill any of those bugs that would be inside of that blanket or linen. Yeah, no, wonderful question, though. That's a good one.
Okay. And then the last thing that's come through is really just a suggestion from one of the shelters who have dealt with some bed bug issues. And they said that they have now had a policy in place where the clients are asked to wash their clothing and bedding prior to checking into the dorms, so that way it goes through that heat cycle and avoid any more infestation if they have bed bugs in their belongings. So
wonderful. Wow, what a really nice idea. And it sounds like they're already ahead of the game with implementing an action plan. That is a great example of what part of an action plan should resemble. Kind of creating those policies that are going to help your organization safeguard itself in case the worst comes to worst and you do get bed bugs. But having those kind of safety valves in place is only going to be beneficial for you. Now, that's really great to hear.
Cool. Well, that is all of the questions that we've had come through. If anybody wants to ask anything else, ask now. But thank you to all of you for your questions and participation, and to Steve and Brandon, who's been quiet on the line, but who helped prepare this and provide the presentation today. I think it's been a lot of really helpful information for everyone. So.